CEO runs into black ex-wife in a hospital waiting room, holding a baby boy that looks just like him. Welcome back, dear friends, to Mr. Roman's Story Vault. Some stories begin with love and end with silence. But tonight's story is about what happens when silence breaks, and Truth walks back into the room holding a child who looks like him. If you've ever loved someone you thought you'd never see again, this story will hit home. Stay till the end, and if you believe time can't kill real love, tap subscribe and let's dive in. Xavier paced the sterile hospital waiting room, the polished leather of his shoes scuffing against the tile as he walked back and forth. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, his tailored suit and commanding posture marked him as a man used to being in control. But at this moment, anxiety clouded his grey eyes. He was here waiting for news about his father's emergency surgery, and for once in his life, the CEO felt utterly powerless. Every so often, Xavier ran a hand through his dark hair and glanced toward the double doors leading to the operating theatres, hoping a doctor would emerge with good news. As he turned on his heel for another circuit of the room, Xavier nearly collided with someone walking in from the entrance. He stepped back, murmuring an apology, and froze as he looked up into a pair of familiar deep brown eyes. His heart gave a jolt. It was Leora. Leora, his ex-wife, the woman he had loved more than life itself, and the woman he had let slip away due to his own pride and mistakes. He hadn't seen her in over a year, not since the painful day the divorce was finalized. Yet here she was, standing barely a few feet away, looking just as beautiful and poised as he remembered. Her brown skin had the same warm glow, though now her eyes held a guarded softness he hadn't seen before. She wore a casual maroon wrap dress, and her long black hair was pulled back into a loose bun, a few tendrils framing her face. In her arms, she held a small bundle, a baby swaddled in a light blue blanket, sleeping soundly against her shoulder. Xavier's breath caught in his throat. A baby. His gaze traveled from Leora's astonished face down to the infant she cradled. The baby was perhaps only a few months old. A little boy, from the looks of the blue onesie peeking out. The baby stirred slightly, and as he shifted, Xavier glimpsed a pair of tiny round cheeks and the hint of a curly lash against the infant's skin. Something about the child's face made Xavier's chest tighten. The baby's complexion was a warm caramel, and even in sleep, the little boy looked oddly familiar. Xavier couldn't shake the feeling that he'd seen that tiny face before. Perhaps in the mirror, a long time ago. The baby looked just like him as a baby, judging by an old photo Xavier's mother used to keep. Leora seemed equally shocked to see Xavier. Her eyes widened, and she unconsciously adjusted the baby in her arms, almost as if to shield him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hospital waiting room suddenly felt even quieter, the distant beeps of monitors and hushed voices of nurses, the only backdrop to this unexpected reunion. Xavier. Leora's voice was soft and unsure. It was the same melodic voice that used to greet him every morning, now laden with disbelief. Xavier swallowed hard, finding his voice. Leora. He nodded slightly, attempting a polite smile, even as his heart pounded. Hi, it's been a while. Leora nodded, licking her lips nervously. It has. She glanced away for a second, perhaps gathering herself, then met his eyes again. How have you been? It was a loaded question, one Xavier didn't quite know how to answer. How had he been? On the surface, he was thriving, CEO of a growing firm, wealthier than ever, every external measure of success. But on the inside, ever since Leora left, he'd been lonely, haunted by regret and what-ifs. Yet pride, that accursed pride, kept him from reaching out to her. And now here she stood, unexpectedly in front of him, stirring up all those buried feelings. I've been okay, he replied cautiously. His eyes flickered again to the baby. Curiosity burned in him, but he didn't yet know how to ask. Instead, he returned the question, how about you? Leora managed a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I'm doing well, thank you. She shifted the baby's weight to her other arm. The movement caused the blanket to slip a bit, revealing the baby's face more clearly. Xavier's breath caught again as he saw the child's features in full, a tiny button nose, chubby cheeks, and eyes that were opening, eyes of a striking greyish hazel, uncannily similar to his own. Xavier's mind raced. It could be a coincidence. Hazel eyes aren't unheard of, but combined with the shape of the baby's nose, the set of the little jaw, there was no denying the resemblance he felt. His heart thumped painfully against his ribs. Could it be? Could this baby be? He pushed the thought aside for now, realizing he was staring. The baby was now awake, fussing a little. Leora gently bounced him. "Shh, it's okay, baby," she whispered soothingly. Instinctively, Xavier's businessman composure melted a fraction at the tender sight. He remembered how gentle and caring Leora always was, how she'd nursed wounded birds back to health when they found one by their old apartment window, or how she'd sit for hours talking kindly to his aging grandmother on the phone. She had a warm, nurturing soul. Seeing her as a mother now felt natural, even as it sparked a pang of emotion in Xavier. Still uncertain what to do or say, Xavier gestured awkwardly to one of the waiting room chairs. "Would you like to sit? You look like you've been on your feet a while." Leora hesitated, eyes flicking from him to the empty seat. Perhaps she was weighing whether it was wise to sit with him. After a second, she gave a cautious nod. "Sure, thank you." They both sat down, a chair apart, facing each other slightly. Xavier felt 100 questions swirling in his mind. The silence between them was thick with unspoken history. He cleared his throat gently. "So, are you here visiting someone?" he asked, trying to keep his tone neutral. His eyes drifted meaningfully to the baby, suggesting that maybe the little one was the reason. Leora adjusted her posture and cradled the baby closer. The baby, now more awake, looked up at Xavier with wide, curious eyes. Xavier couldn't help but give a tiny smile and wiggle his fingers in a subtle wave at the child. To his surprise, the baby's face lit up in a fleeting grin, a dimple appearing in his right cheek. Xavier had the same dimple. The realization struck him like a physical blow, and he had to force himself to stay calm. Leora noticed the silent exchange and cleared her throat. "I'm just here for a checkup," she said quietly. "For him. It's nothing serious, just a routine pediatric checkup and some vaccinations." Xavier released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. So the baby wasn't in danger at the moment, thank goodness. He found himself relieved to know that. "Oh, I see," he replied. A pause, then he dared to ask, "He's a handsome little guy. What's his name?" Leora's eyes lingered on Xavier's face for a moment before she answered softly, "His name is Isaiah." "Isaiah," Xavier repeated, tasting the name. It was unique yet familiar, a strong name. Isaiah cooed as if recognizing his name being spoken, and Xavier's heart did a flip. "That's a beautiful name," he added gently. The baby gurgled and reached a tiny hand out of the blanket, waving it aimlessly. Out of reflex, Xavier offered his index finger. Isaiah's tiny fingers wrapped around Xavier's, gripping with surprising strength. Xavier felt an unexpected warmth flood through him at the baby's touch. The connection felt so natural, so right, that it scared him. Leora watched this with an unreadable expression, her posture a bit stiff. She looked as though she wanted to say something, but instead she asked politely, "So, what brings you here? Are you okay?" Xavier blinked, recalling why he was here in the first place. "Oh, my father," he said quietly, nodding toward the operating room doors. "He had a heart attack earlier today. I brought him in for emergency surgery. I'm just waiting to hear how it goes." Leora's features softened with concern. "Oh no, I'm so sorry. I hope he'll be okay." She hesitated, then added, "Your father, I know how important he is to you." Xavier gave a small, tight smile. It was true. Xavier had always respected and looked up to his father, though their relationship had been strained in recent years. And yes, his father was one more person he had let down. The older man hadn't approved of the divorce, and Xavier felt he had disappointed him by not fighting harder for his marriage. "Thank you. I hope so too," he replied. For a moment, the two fell silent again. Xavier found his gaze drifting to Isaiah, who was now contently chewing on a corner of his blanket, making tiny babbling noises. An ache formed in Xavier's chest. If things had gone differently, would he have been here as this baby's father, holding him from the moment he was born? He pushed the thought down, but the resemblance was gnawing at him. Finally, unable to bear the uncertainty, Xavier spoke softly, looking Leora in the eyes. "Leora, I don't mean to be too forward, but he looks a lot like—" Before he could finish the sentence, the double doors to the operating wing swung open. A doctor in surgical scrubs walked out, scanning the room. "Xavier Gray?" the doctor called. Xavier immediately shot to his feet, gently disentangling his finger from Isaiah's grasp. His heart leapt in fear and hope. "Yes, I'm Xavier Gray," he responded, stepping forward. Leora stood as well, looking on with worry in her eyes. Xavier appreciated that concern radiating from her. Despite everything between them, she still cared enough to care about his father's well-being. The doctor gave a reassuring smile. "Your father's surgery went well. He's stable now and in recovery. We managed to clear the blockage. He'll need to rest and make some lifestyle changes, but he should be fine." Xavier closed his eyes briefly in relief. "Thank you, doctor. Thank you so much," he said, shaking the doctor's hand fervently. The weight on his shoulders lifted slightly, and he felt gratitude coursing through him. As the doctor gave a few more instructions about seeing his father in an hour once they moved him to a room, Xavier listened and nodded. When the doctor departed, Xavier turned back to Leora, who was smiling softly. "I'm glad to hear that," she said sincerely. "I'll keep him in my prayers." "Thank you, Leora." Xavier smiled back, the first genuine smile that had touched his lips in a long time. It felt natural to have her by his side in that moment of relief. For a second, it was almost like old times, her supporting him through a stressful moment, offering comfort with just her presence. They both sat down again, but this time the atmosphere felt a little lighter. Isaiah had dozed off once more in Leora's arms, his tiny fist curled against her collarbone. Xavier's eyes softened as he gazed at the sleeping baby, then back to Leora. He realized he had so many things he wanted to ask her and say to her, apologies, explanations, and questions about the baby that he didn't even know how to begin to voice. Part of him was still reeling from the shock of seeing her again, and part of him was afraid. This moment would end, and she would walk out of his life once more, perhaps forever this time. Clearing his throat, Xavier started cautiously. "Leora, I know this is unexpected. I'm not sure how to say this, but it's really good to see you. I didn't think I'd ever get the chance." He trailed off, the weight of emotion clogging his throat. Leora looked down at her baby boy, lightly stroking his back with her palm. "It's good to see you too," she admitted quietly. "I wasn't sure if that's something I'd ever say again." She looked up, meeting his gaze, and there was a hint of vulnerability in her eyes. "It still feels a bit surreal. Running into you here of all places." Xavier nodded in agreement. "I know. Fate has a funny way of working." He hesitated, then plunged ahead, voice gentle. "I couldn't help but notice. Isaiah, he looks so much like—" Suddenly, Isaiah let out a small whimper, then a louder cry. The baby squirmed in Leora's arms, perhaps waking hungry or just irritable from the hospital environment. Leora's attention snapped down to her son. She gently rocked him, cooing, "Hey, shh. It's okay, sweetheart. Mummy's here." But Isaiah's cries only grew louder, little face crumpling in distress. A couple of other people in the waiting room glanced over sympathetically. Leora looked apologetic and a bit flustered as she rummaged in her diaper bag for a pacifier or bottle. Without thinking, Xavier stepped closer. Do you mind if I try?" he asked softly, holding out his arms. He had little experience with infants, but something in him instinctively wanted to comfort the baby. Maybe it was the protective tug he felt, or simply wanting to ease Leora's stress. Leora blinked in surprise at his offer. She hesitated a moment, then seeing Xavier's earnest expression and knowing how determined little Isaiah could be when fussy. She carefully transferred the wailing baby into Xavier's arms. Support his head. Yes, just like that, she gently instructed as Xavier cradled Isaiah. Xavier adjusted his hold as she directed, and soon he was holding Isaiah securely for the first time. The baby was lighter than he expected, warm and wriggling in his grasp. He rocked side to side a bit awkwardly at first, but then more steadily. "Hey there, little guy," he murmured in a low, soothing tone. "You're okay, Isaiah. Shh, we're right here." Leora watched anxiously, ready to take her son back if needed. But to both their surprise, after a few moments of Xavier's gentle rocking and soft voice, Isaiah's cries began to subside. The baby blinked up at Xavier through teary eyes, seeming to study this new face. Xavier couldn't help but smile at him, and he softly hummed a little tune, an old lullaby his own mother used to sing. His voice was deep but gentle, and the unfamiliar melody seemed to captivate Isaiah. Soon, the baby's cries turned into hiccups and then faded into quiet coos. Xavier glanced at Leora with wonder and a touch of pride. "I think he's calming down." Leora let out a breath she'd been holding and gave a small laugh of relief. "I'm impressed. He usually doesn't take to strangers at all." There was a hint of meaning behind her words that both of them silently acknowledged. Perhaps Isaiah recognized something in Xavier, some comforting familiarity. The baby reached up, and to Xavier's amusement, grabbed onto the silky patterned tie around Xavier's neck, stuffing a corner of it into his mouth. Xavier chuckled. "Oh, you like my tie, buddy? You have good taste," he joked softly. The sight of the powerful CEO, tie now drooled on by an infant, making silly faces at the baby, would have stunned anyone from Xavier's corporate world. But in this moment, Xavier couldn't care less about appearances. He felt an overwhelming tenderness that he hadn't felt in a very long time. Leora observed the interaction quietly. Her heart was conflicted, thumping with a mix of emotions, seeing Xavier hold. Her son so naturally hearing him hum that lullaby she hadn't heard in years. It stirred feelings she thought she had buried. She remembered how Xavier had always had a softer side underneath his driven exterior, the side that gave generous bonuses to struggling employees, that fostered puppies from the shelter, that once slow danced with her in their living room just to make her smile on a bad day. For a moment, the years of pain and distance seemed to melt away, and it was just the three of them in their own little world. They almost looked like a family, but reality crept back in as Isaiah, now content, closed his eyes and drifted back to sleep in Xavier's arms. Leora gently reached out. "Here, I can take him," she said softly. Xavier felt a surprising reluctance as he handed the baby back, wishing he could hold him a little longer. As Leora settled Isaiah against her shoulder, patting his back gently, Xavier spoke the question. That had been burning in his mind from the start, albeit cautiously. "Leora, how old is he?" Leora tensed just slightly. She answered without meeting his eyes, focusing on tucking the blankets snugly around Isaiah. "He's almost 6 months old." 6 months. Xavier did the quick math in his head and felt his stomach flip. 6 months old, which meant the baby was likely conceived about 15 months ago. And 15 months ago, they had still been married, or at least were together. In fact, 15 months ago was around the time of their separation. His voice came out hushed and a bit unsteady. 6 months. He was born after. He didn't finish the sentence. "After we divorced, after you left." The implications hung heavy in the air. Leora finally looked at him, her eyes searching his. There was fear in her expression, and sadness, and something like regret. Xavier realized she must have known this question would come eventually, ever since the moment he saw her with the baby. Before either of them could say more, a nurse approached with a warm smile. "Ms. Leora, the doctor can see you and your son now for his checkup." Leora stood, cradling Isaiah. "Thank you," she replied to the nurse. She turned to Xavier, looking torn. I have to go in. They're just going to do a quick exam, and the shots. It shouldn't take long." Xavier nodded, 1,000 things unsaid between them. "Of course. I'll be here. His eyes locked on hers, hoping she understood that he wasn't going anywhere, not until they talked more, not until he got answers. Leora offered a faint, tentative smile and then followed the nurse through a door toward the pediatric wing, leaving Xavier standing there in the waiting room, his heart and mind in turmoil. As he watched her disappear down the hall, Isaiah's tiny form snuggled against her, Xavier ran a hand over his face. He could still smell the faint scent of baby powder on his suit from holding the child. He sank slowly back into the chair, his mind racing. That baby. Could he really be mine? He replayed every detail. Isaiah's eyes, the dimple, the timing of his birth. Xavier's heart thudded. It all pointed to one answer. Isaiah is likely his son. A son he never knew about. A son Leora hadn't told him about. Emotions clashed within him. Astonishment, hurt that Leora hadn't reached out to tell him, guilt for how things ended, and an unexpected surge of joy and wonder that he might have a child. He remembered a time, not too long ago, when the idea of having children had frightened him. How ironic that now the idea he might have a son filled him with awe and a fierce, protective love he didn't know he was capable of feeling so instantly. Xavier realized that he had to know the truth, officially. But he also knew that how he handled the next conversation with Leora would be critical. She had kept Isaiah a secret for a reason. Perhaps, she thought, he wouldn't have wanted the baby. The thought made his chest ache. How could she ever think that? But then, a whisper of memory slid through his mind, because of how things ended between us. The things he had said, or failed to say. Xavier leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and let the memories wash over him. The last days of their marriage, the mistakes that led to the day she walked away. He needed to understand how they had gotten to that point. Maybe then he could find a way to fix this, if it wasn't already too late. Remembering the past, 3 years earlier, a younger Xavier stood at a lavish corporate gala, the kind where champagne flowed freely and string music wafted through the ballroom. He wore a sharp tuxedo that night, but despite the finery and the glamour of the event, he felt out of place and a bit bored. These events were a necessary part of networking as a rising star in the business world, but they rarely excited him. That was, until he saw her. Xavier had been conversing politely with an investor when from the corner of his eye he caught sight of a woman in a deep blue dress. She was laughing at something a companion said, her head tilted back slightly, showcasing an elegant neck and radiant smile. Xavier found himself staring. It was not just her beauty that captured him, but the genuine warmth in her laughter that stood out in a room full of polite, reserved chuckles. He excused himself from the dull conversation and moved through the crowd, drawn toward the woman in blue almost as if by gravity. As he approached, he overheard snippets of her conversation. She was talking with enthusiasm about a community outreach program she was organizing, something about providing mentorship to underprivileged teens. The passion in her voice was unmistakable. In a sea of shallow small talk, her words had substance. Xavier introduced himself with a confident smile, but he quickly discovered that Leora was not easily impressed by titles or bank accounts. When he extended a hand and said, "Hello, I'm Xavier Gray," she simply responded with a polite nod. "Leora, nice to meet you." She didn't fawn or ask about his company like so many did. Instead, she quipped, "Xavier Gray, as in the new VP everyone's whispering about tonight? You're kind of the man of the hour." He felt a little flush of pride, but she was smirking playfully, not swooning. "I suppose I am," he replied with a light chuckle, "though I'd rather talk about you being the woman of the hour. I couldn't help overhearing about the mentorship program. Are you involved in that?" Leora's eyes lit up. Xavier noticed they were the richest shade of brown, warm and expressive. "I am. I work for a non-profit that focuses on youth education. We pair professionals with teens to help guide their career paths. I was just telling my colleague about a workshop we have next week." Xavier was intrigued. The passion in her voice made him want to know more. They slipped easily into conversation, moving to a quieter corner of the ballroom. Xavier found himself genuinely interested in what she had to say, and he shared his own dreams of using his success to make a difference beyond profit margins. They talked and laughed as though they were old friends, not strangers who'd met just moments ago. That night, Xavier asked for her phone number, and for the first time in a long time, he felt nervous anticipation as he waited for her answer. Leora teased, "I don't usually give my number out at these things. Too many boring guys in suits." She eyed him playfully. "But you seem a bit different, Xavier Grey. How about you give me your card and I'll think about it?" He obliged, handing over a sleek business card. To his delight, she did call him 3 days later, after making him sweat just a little. They set up their first date at a quaint coffee shop near Leora's office, instead of an expensive restaurant, her suggestion, as she claimed the coffee was the best in town. Xavier remembered walking into that cafe, more nervous than he'd been in any boardroom. Leora was already there, 2 mugs of steaming cappuccino in front of her. She greeted him with that bright smile, putting him instantly at ease. They spent hours in animated conversation, oblivious to the world around them. She challenged his ideas, made him laugh until his sides ached, and shared her own vulnerabilities and dreams. Xavier found himself opening up in ways he never had with anyone else, telling her about his mother who had passed away when he was young, about the pressure he felt to live up to his father's legacy, about his fear that in climbing the corporate ladder, he might lose sight of what truly mattered. Leora listened intently and shared her own stories. She was the only child of a single mother, had worked hard to put herself through college, and was determined to give back to her community. Her empathy and strength captivated Xavier. It didn't take long for both of them to fall deeply in love. Fast forward a year, and Xavier was on one knee in the very same cafe where they had their first date, proposing with a modest but heartfelt ring. He remembered the tears of joy in Leora's eyes as she said yes, and the way she hugged him so tight he thought he might burst. They got married in a small ceremony at a lakeside park, surrounded by close friends and a few family members. Xavier's father, Reginald Grey, had been skeptical at first. Leora came from a different world than theirs, and Xavier could sense his father's quiet reservations, some of which he suspected had to do with Leora's race and humble background. But after seeing how happy she made his son, Reginald had warmed up considerably. By the wedding day, his father was even smiling in the photos, giving a toast in which he welcomed Leora to the family. Leora's mother, Jada, was overjoyed to see her daughter marry a man who clearly adored her. The families blended on that day, setting aside differences. Xavier remembered Leora walking down the aisle toward him, radiant in a simple ivory gown, her eyes only on him. He remembered the vow he made as he slid the ring onto her finger, to love and cherish for all the days of my life. He had meant every word with all his heart. Their early married life was blissful. They moved into a comfortable townhouse in the city. Leora continued working at the non-profit. Xavier supported it as a donor, and even volunteered on weekends, painting community centers, and speaking at youth events with her. He continued climbing at his firm, eventually becoming CEO after the previous head retired. They celebrated each other's wins, supported each other through challenges, and every night ended in each other's arms, whispering about their day or dreaming aloud about the future. Those days were filled with love, partnership, and hope. They talked often about having kids someday. Leora loved children and often babysat for friends, and Xavier imagined having a daughter. With Leora's eyes, or a son he could teach to play baseball like his father taught him. But someday always seemed a little down the road. Xavier wanted to solidify his career, and Leora respected that, focusing on her own projects. However, the more success Xavier achieved as CEO, the more responsibilities piled on. Little by little, the demands of running a company started creeping into their personal life. Late-night phone calls, business trips, and weekend work became more frequent. Xavier assured Leora each time that it was just a rough patch, and that once things settled, he'd have more time. Leora, ever supportive, tried to be understanding. She took on more of the household duties, and her own social life shrank as she tried to align her schedule to his. There was a memory that floated up in Xavier's mind now, sitting in that hospital waiting room, which made him wince. One night, Leora had prepared a special dinner for him at home. She had been excited about some good news. One of her mentees had gotten into a great college, and she wanted to celebrate and also talk about something important with Xavier. She hinted it was a surprise. Xavier had promised to be home by 7. But that evening, an impromptu meeting with a key client kept him at the office. By the time he rushed home, apologetic and exhausted, it was nearly 9:30. He found the dinner cold on the table, and Leora asleep on the couch, dried tears on her cheeks. With the TV quietly playing their favorite movie that she had hoped to watch with him, he had felt like a jerk, gently waking her and apologizing profusely. Leora had given him a sad smile and said, "It's okay, I know you're busy." But something in her eyes told him it wasn't entirely okay. Later that night, she told him what the important surprise was that she had wanted to share. One of her colleagues had offered her a chance to lead a new branch of their non-profit, which would involve some travel and a lot of time commitment. She was excited, but had wanted to discuss it with Xavier because it would mean her also being very busy. Still consumed by guilt for missing the dinner, Xavier had reacted less than enthusiastically, expressing concern that if both of them were busy, when would they have time together? In hindsight, he realized that conversation must have been a blow to Leora. She likely felt he wasn't supportive of her ambitions. Yet even through these strains, they still loved each other deeply. Every time they argued, they made up and promised to do better. They held on to the hope that they'd find the right balance. But the real breaking point came the following year, and it was tied to the very issue now staring Xavier in the face: children. Approximately 1.5 years ago, Xavier came home late yet again, after another 12-hour day at the office. He was greeted not by the usual warm hug from Leora, but by silence. The lights in the living room were dimmed. For a moment, he thought maybe Leora was out or already asleep. But then he saw her. She was sitting at the kitchen table, a mug of tea in her hands, staring blankly at a spot on the wall. She looked lost in thought and didn't seem to hear him come in. "Leora?" he called softly as he set down his briefcase. The weariness in his voice was clear. He was bone-tired. Leora looked up, and Xavier's heart sank as he noticed her eyes were red, as if she'd been crying. He rushed to her side. "Hey, what's wrong?" he asked gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. She looked at him, hesitating. He could see her struggling to find words. Finally, she took a breath and spoke, her voice trembling slightly. "Xavier, I have something to tell you." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small white plastic stick and set it on the table in front of him. It took Xavier a moment to realize what it was: a home pregnancy test. He stared at it, his brain taking a second to register the 2 pink lines in the result window. "I'm pregnant," Leora said, confirming what was now obvious. A rush of emotion flooded Xavier. Surprise, confusion, a strange mix of joy and fear. "Pregnant?" he echoed, picking up the test as if to double-check it himself. His heart began to pound. "A baby? We're going to have a baby?" He looked at Leora, who was biting her lower lip, eyes shining with a cautious hope. "I know it's sooner than we planned," she said quickly. "But Xavier, I'm happy about it. Scared, but happy. I wanted to tell you earlier tonight. I had this whole plan to surprise you at dinner, but you got home so late and I've just been sitting here thinking." Xavier's mind whirled. Sooner than we planned was an understatement. They had often said they'd try for kids in a couple of years once things settled. But things had never settled, and now a baby was on the way, ready or not. He knelt in front of Leora, taking her hands in his. There were tears in her eyes now, and she searched his face. "Say something," she whispered, voice cracking. "Please." Xavier opened his mouth. He wanted to say, "I'm happy too." He wanted to sweep her into a hug and assure her they'd figure it out. Part of him felt those things. Deep down, the idea of a little one that was half him, half her, it was miraculous. But another part of him, the stressed, overworked part, panicked. He thought of the projects on his plate, the fact that he was often away, the financial projections, the investors counting on him. How would a baby fit into this hectic life? He worried about Leora's career too. She had just started leading that new branch of the non-profit. It was a great achievement for her. How would a baby affect her dreams? In his hesitation, Leora's eyes dimmed a little. She squeezed his hands. "Xavier, what are you thinking?" He finally spoke, trying to be honest about his feelings. I'm sorry. I'm just surprised. We weren't expecting this, and I know things have been so hectic." He realized he was still holding the test and set it down carefully. "It's a lot to take in." Leora nodded slowly. "I know. For me too. But we'll get through it, right? Together." She gave a shaky smile. "It might actually help us slow down and refocus on what's important. A baby. Our baby. That is what's important." Xavier knew she was right about what mattered. He should have agreed wholeheartedly and embraced this chance to refocus. But instead, his fears spoke louder. "What about our jobs? Your work with the non-profit, my company? How will we manage a newborn with everything going on? Maybe the timing. Maybe it isn't ideal." As soon as those words left his mouth, he regretted them. Leora's face fell. "Not ideal?" she repeated, hurt evident in her voice. "Xavier, a baby isn't some inconvenience you pencil into your schedule. It's our child. We always said we wanted this eventually. Well, eventually is now." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated at himself and the situation. I know. I'm just trying to be practical. We have to consider finances, time." She cut him off, her tone rising in disbelief. "Finances? You're a millionaire CEO, and you're worried about finances and time. When have you last made time for us, Xavier, let alone for a baby? If we keep waiting for the perfect time, it will never come." Her words, though truthful, pricked Xavier's pride. He bristled slightly. "That's not fair. I've been working hard for us, for our future." Leora stood up abruptly, pulling her hands from his. "But what future, Xavier? At this rate, when would we ever start a family? I'm not getting younger. We can't just keep delaying until your work is less busy, because your work is always busy." Her voice broke, and a tear rolled down her cheek. "I'm tired of being sidelined. I'm tired of feeling like I come second to your job." Xavier rose as well, reaching for her, but she stepped back. He felt his own frustration and hurt bubbling up. "I never meant to sideline you. I'm doing this for us, to give us a good life." "What good is a good life if we're not happy, Xavier?" she replied, shaking her head. She wiped the tear with the back of her hand and straightened, a resolve coming into her eyes. "Listen, I've decided I'm having this baby. I want this baby. I hope you'll want it too, and want to be a part of our lives. But if you can't handle this, if you really feel this is just an inconvenient timing," she swallowed hard, "then I'll do it alone." Her words struck him like a slap. Do it alone? The notion of her raising their child without him was unbearable. "Leora, don't even say that. Of course I want to be with you. I just wish we had planned better." He was trying to backtrack, realizing how horribly he was messing this up, but the damage was done. Leora's face contorted with the pain of his lackluster response. "Planned better? Well, surprise. I guess life doesn't always stick to our plans." She wrapped her arms around herself as if cold. "I needed you to be happy about this, or at least reassuring. I've been terrified all day, and the one person I needed to lean on is waffling." Xavier felt desperation rising. He stepped forward. "I'm sorry. You're right. I'm just in shock. But I am here for you, I promise. I love you, Leora." He gently took her shoulders. "We'll get through this together. I do want our baby." He did his best to sound convincing, and part of him truly meant it. He pulled her into a hug. After a moment, Leora relaxed a little against him, hugging him back. "I love you too," she whispered. "I'm sorry I snapped. I'm just so scared, Xavier, and I've felt so alone lately with you being so busy. I didn't know how you'd react." He kissed the top of her head. "You're right. I haven't been around like I should. I'm sorry. That changes now, okay? You and our baby are my priority." And in that moment, he truly resolved to do better. For the next few weeks, things did improve. Xavier made an effort to come home earlier, and he attended the first ultrasound, with Leora seeing the tiny bean on the screen that was their child. They both cried and held each other in awe after that appointment, feeling a new bond forming over this life they had created. Xavier found himself placing a protective hand on Leora's belly at night, imagining feeling the baby kick in a few months. They even started whispering about baby names. She liked Isaiah for a boy, or Amara for a girl, and he found he loved her choices. However, the peace didn't last as long as they hoped. The corporate world rarely slowed down for personal joy. A major crisis hit Xavier's company, a scandal with one of the senior executives that threatened to tank the stock price. Xavier was consumed with damage control, working around the clock to firefight the situation. He tried not to bring the stress home, but he became distant again, often coming home only to sleep for a few hours before rushing back to the office. Leora, now in her second trimester, felt the sting of his absence deeply. She attended a couple of prenatal checkups alone when Xavier was stuck in back-to-back emergency meetings. Friends threw her a small early baby shower, and Xavier arrived late, missing most of it, which embarrassed and hurt Leora deeply, even though she covered for him with excuses to her friends. One fateful night, Xavier returned home around midnight, finding Leora awake and waiting, despite her exhaustion. She confronted him gently but firmly, expressing how scared she was to raise a child with someone who was never around. She voiced a fear that maybe he was regretting the pregnancy. Already stressed, Xavier reacted defensively, and an argument erupted. "I'm doing everything I can to fix this mess at work, so our life doesn't fall apart. Why can't you understand that?" He had snapped, loosening his tie with agitation. "And what about our family? This baby isn't waiting for your work to be convenient, Xavier." Leora shot back, her voice quivering with emotion. "I need you now, not later, not when you think it's perfect timing. I need you now. I can't be everywhere at once," he yelled, immediately regretting raising his voice. He saw Leora flinch, and he tried to soften his tone. "I'm sorry, this is important, Leora. If I don't save the company, we'll have nothing. The stress, it's killing me. Can't you see I'm trying to protect us?" Leora's eyes were full of tears now. "The only thing hurting us is this distance, Xavier. Money isn't what I need protected. I need my husband. Our baby needs their father. We can deal with less money, a smaller house, whatever, but I can't do with less of you." The argument continued, both of them saying things out of hurt and frustration, until Leora, voice hollow, said, "Maybe we rushed into thinking we could make this work. Maybe you're just not cut out to be a husband and father." That wounded Xavier's pride deeply. In anger and hurt, he lashed out, "And maybe you're the one who doesn't understand what it takes. Life isn't some fairy tale or a charity project you can just pour your heart into. It takes practical sacrifices. You talk about me not being there. Who do you think I'm doing all this for? You talk about needing less money and a smaller house. Fine. Should I just throw away everything I've worked for? Would that make you happy?" Leora looked at him with such disappointment. "I never asked you to throw away anything. I asked you to share your life with me, but it feels like I'm not part of your life anymore. Just an accessory you drag out for events and ignore when convenient. If that's what marriage to you is, then maybe we shouldn't be married." The words hung in the air. Both of them were shocked she'd said it. A cold chill went through Xavier. He hadn't ever truly contemplated losing her, not until that moment. You don't mean that," he said softly, fear creeping into his voice. Leora's tears fell freely now. "I don't want to mean it, but I can't go on like this, constantly hurting and worrying and feeling alone. It's not good for me, and it's not good for the baby. Something has to change, Xavier." Xavier approached her, reaching out. "It will. I promise, I'll change things. Just, please, don't talk about not being married. We can figure this out." She looked at him, desperately wanting to believe. "We can try counseling. Or maybe you can take some paternity leave early, just a break." He nodded, willing to agree to anything in that desperate moment. Yes, whatever you need. I'll talk to the board, maybe appoint an interim to handle things. You and the baby come first." "I'm sorry, Leora. I'm so sorry." They clung to each other, both crying. For that night, it seemed like they might find a way. But fate intervened cruelly. The stress, the emotional roller coaster, perhaps even that intense argument, something tipped the balance. 2 days later, Leora woke in the early dawn to a pain in her abdomen and found she was bleeding. Panicked, she called for Xavier, who rushed to her side. They sped to the hospital, but in his gut, Xavier knew what was happening. At just about 20 weeks pregnant, Leora was having complications, and it was too early, far too early. The hours that followed were among the worst in both their lives. Leora had a placental abruption, and despite the doctor's efforts, they couldn't save the pregnancy. Their baby was gone before they even got to know if it was a boy or girl. The loss devastated them. Leora was inconsolable, and Xavier, drowning in his own grief, tried to be strong for her. But in the aftermath, something fragile between them broke completely. Leora fell into a depression that she tried to hide, and Xavier blamed himself mercilessly. If only he hadn't. It stressed her. If only he'd been a better husband. If only he could have prevented the tragedy somehow. They barely spoke about the loss. It was as if it was too painful to voice. Friends and family offered condolences, but the two of them, instead of coming together, drifted further apart. Xavier threw himself into work even more, partly to escape the pain, partly to regain a sense of control. Leora, meanwhile, returned to her mother's house for a couple of weeks to recover physically and emotionally. Xavier told himself she just needed space and time. But even when she returned home, a wall had been erected between them. They tried to act like life was normal, but it wasn't. Small disagreements now ignited into fights quicker than before. Leora felt Xavier had broken his promises to change, and Xavier felt Leora had emotionally shut him out after the loss. Neither knew how to process their grief together. The final straw came one late evening when Leora discovered a series of emails on Xavier's laptop. One of Xavier's female colleagues had sent him several messages, nothing explicitly inappropriate, but rather overly friendly check-ins and a suggestive line about grabbing dinner to relieve stress. Xavier had not engaged with the flirtation, but he also hadn't shut it down forcefully, trying to be polite for the sake of collegiality. When Leora saw those in her fragile state, she assumed the worst. That while she was mourning their child, he was entertaining another woman's attention. Xavier found her crying and packing a suitcase. "I can't do this anymore, Xavier. I feel broken, and I feel like you're already halfway out the door. Maybe you'd rather be with someone who doesn't have all this baggage. Someone who can be the perfect CEO's wife, without falling apart." He was bewildered, then saw the laptop screen and realized what she thought. He tried to explain desperately, "Leora, no, it's not what you think. I have never and would never cheat on you. She's just a co-worker. I've been deleting her emails and avoiding her in person. You have to believe me." Leora's eyes searched his, full of doubt and hurt. "I want to believe you, but I also needed you to fight for me, for us, and you didn't until it was too late. How do I trust that? Every time I needed you most, you weren't there." Her voice was soft, defeated. Maybe losing the baby. Maybe it was a sign that we weren't meant to be, that our lives are on different paths. "Don't say that," Xavier pleaded, tears forming in his own eyes. "We can recover from this. We can have another baby someday. We can be happy again, I promise you. I know I messed up, but I love you, Leora. I love you so much. Please, please don't leave." Leora stood there trembling, torn. She loved him too. He could see it, but there was so much pain between them now. After a long moment, she simply shook her head, fresh tears spilling. "I'm sorry," she whispered. She picked up her suitcase. "I need time. I need to find myself again. Every day here just reminds me of what we lost and how much it hurt." Xavier's world crashed around him as he watched her walk out the door that night. She went to her mother's again. He hoped it was temporary. He called, He texted, but her replies were sparse. She said she needed space and time. Weeks went by, and then she made it official by filing for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. Xavier was a wreck the day he signed the divorce papers, but pride and hurt kept him from making a grand gesture to win her back. He thought she truly wanted nothing more to do with him. His father, friends, all advised him to fight for her, but he felt it was hopeless. If she could walk away, maybe she truly didn't love him anymore. In truth, he was just too ashamed of how he'd failed her. They parted ways civilly, no fights over assets or money. She refused any financial support beyond what the lawyers mandated, not wanting his charity. And just like that, Leora was gone from his life. A beautiful chapter of his life ended not with a bang, but with a sad scratch of pen on paper and a final quiet court hearing. Years ago, they lost everything. Not because they stopped loving each other, but because neither was brave enough to say, "I'm hurting too." Have you ever loved someone so deeply that pride became your enemy? Share your thoughts in the comments. Someone out there needs to know they're not alone in that kind of love. Xavier came back to the present with a jolt as the sound of a nearby coffee vending machine whirred to life. He exhaled slowly, realizing his hands had curled into fists on his knees during the painful reminiscence. So much pain, he thought. He rubbed his palms against his eyes, which were damp. He'd been on the verge of tears from reliving it all. And now, against all odds, Leora was back in front of him, with a baby that by all clues was his own flesh and blood. Xavier understood something crucial at that moment. Life had given him an unexpected second chance. A chance to make things right, to not let pride or fear rob him of what truly mattered, his family. If Isaiah was indeed his son, Xavier silently vowed not to fail him or Leora again. He had to swallow every ounce of pride, express every apology, and fight for them with all he had, if she would let him. A short while later, Leora emerged from the pediatric wing, holding a bandaged, and now slightly grumpy Isaiah. He likely had just gotten his vaccination shots. The baby's lower lip was puffed out in a near cry, and Leora was murmuring softly to him, kissing his forehead. She paused by the waiting room desk to sign some papers, rocking Isaiah gently in her arms. Xavier stood up and slowly approached, not wanting to startle either of them. "Everything okay?" he asked softly. Leora looked up at him, and even though her guard was clearly up again, she answered, "Yes, everything's fine. He's healthy, just unhappy about the shots." She offered a gentle bounce to Isaiah and cooed, "You were so brave, Isaiah. Yes, you were. Mommy's brave boy." Hearing her call herself Mommy struck Xavier's heartstrings. He inched a bit closer, smiling at the baby. "He'll be okay. I remember getting a lollipop after shots when I was a kid. Maybe he deserves a treat," he said softly, trying to ease the tension. To his surprise, Leora smiled briefly. "I think he's a bit young for lollipops, but I have some milk ready for him in the bottle. That's probably all the treat he wants." Isaiah's fussing had calmed just at the sound of his mother's voice. The little boy regarded Xavier with those soulful hazel eyes, as if recognizing him from earlier. He made a mewling sound and reached one tiny hand out toward Xavier. Xavier's heart melted. Tentatively, he offered his finger again. Isaiah grabbed it, and this time promptly tried to gnaw on it. Both Xavier and Leora chuckled softly. Leora carefully shifted Isaiah into a more comfortable hold and looked at Xavier, a mixture of determination and nervousness on her face. "Xavier, about Isaiah." She took a breath. "I know you must have questions." Xavier nodded slowly, choosing his words. "I do, but I don't want to push you. I know this is probably just as unexpected for you as it is for me, running into each other. If you're willing, I'd really like to talk. Can we maybe go somewhere a bit more comfortable? Maybe the hospital cafeteria or a coffee shop nearby. I can get you something. Tea, coffee, maybe some water or juice for now. You've been here a while." Leora glanced at her son, who was still awake but calm, then back at Xavier. She seemed to consider it carefully. He could sense her hesitation. It had been a long time, and their history was messy. But finally, she gave a small nod. Okay, let's get a coffee or something. I think we do need to talk. Relief and apprehension flooded Xavier at once. All right, he said softly. There's a cafe in the lobby that's fairly quiet this time of evening. I'll grab us a table. A few minutes later, they found themselves seated at a small table in the corner of the hospital's lobby cafe. Through a large window, the lights of the city twinkled against the dusk sky. Leora sat across from Xavier, bouncing Isaiah on her knee lightly. Xavier had gotten them 2 cups of tea, Leora's herbal, his black, as well as a muffin in case she was hungry. She had thanked him quietly for it. For a moment, they sipped in silence, both gathering courage. Xavier decided he should start. Leora, I need to say this first. I am so sorry. She looked up, meeting his eyes. Hers were guarded but curious. Sorry for everything, Xavier said, his voice heavy with remorse. He realized there was so much to apologize for that he hardly knew where to begin. For how I let you down, for not being the husband you deserved, for not being there when you needed me most, and for anything and everything that led you to feel you had to go through pregnancy and becoming a mother all on your own. His throat tightened as he said that, guilt crashing over him. Leora's eyes glistened, but she remained composed. She stroked Isaiah's soft curls absent-mindedly. It was a very difficult time, she said softly, for both of us. I admit, I never imagined I'd end up doing this alone. Xavier's gaze fell to Isaiah, who was now contentedly playing with a plastic teething ring Leora had given him. The baby babbled to himself, blissfully unaware of the emotional storm swirling above him. Leora, I have to ask, and please, I hope you'll understand why. Xavier took a breath. Is Isaiah? Is he my son? Leora's hand froze on the baby's head for a moment. She bit her lip, and then nodded slowly. Yes, Xavier. He's your son. Our son. Even expecting the answer, hearing it stated plainly sent a powerful surge through Xavier. A mix of joy, sorrow, and disbelief. His eyes welled with tears that he did not try to hide. He let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. My son, he whispered, as if trying the words out. He looked at Isaiah anew in wonder. He's our son. Leora's eyes overflowed now, tears sliding down her cheeks silently. Perhaps she hadn't allowed herself to think of Isaiah as their son, not truly, until this moment. Perhaps she had steeled herself to be both mother and father for the baby, and now the father was here, claiming that role. Xavier gently reached across the small table, and, when she didn't pull back, took Leora's free hand in his. Thank you, he said earnestly, his voice trembling. Thank you for giving me a son. He is beautiful, Leora. He's perfect. Leora wiped her tears with the back of her other hand and let out a shaky laugh. He is pretty perfect, isn't he? She squeezed Xavier's hand slightly. He has your eyes, and your smile, Xavier quickly added, recalling that brief little grin earlier had a sweetness that mirrored hers. They shared a tender look, one that echoed with years of history and the new bond of their child. But soon, uncertainty crept back into Leora's expression. She gently withdrew her hand, not out of anger but caution. I know you must be upset. That I didn't tell you, she began hesitantly. Xavier exhaled and shook his head. I mean, yes and no. I wish I had known from the start, missing out on being there for his birth, for those first months. I can never get that time back, and it hurts. But more than that, I hate the thought of you going through everything alone. His jaw tensed. I would have been there, Leora. I would have wanted to be there, no matter what was happening between us. Leora looked down, her lashes wet with tears. That night, the night I left, she said slowly. I didn't know I was pregnant. Not yet. I found out a few weeks later. Honestly, I was in shock when I saw the test was positive again. She paused to steady her voice. After losing our first baby, I was terrified. And then we weren't even together anymore. I had to wrap my head around doing it on my own. Xavier felt a stab of pain at the mention of their first baby, the one they lost. He squeezed the edge of his teacup with white knuckles, emotions in check. You could have called me, he said softly. I would have dropped everything. Leora gave him a sad smile. I thought about it 100 times. But, Xavier, the way things ended, I was so hurt, and I honestly didn't know if you would want this baby, if you weren't even wanting to be with me anymore. We'd been through so much heartbreak. I thought maybe, just maybe, this child was mine to start fresh with. That maybe you'd moved on and wouldn't want to reopen old wounds. Xavier's eyes widened. Moved on? Leora, I never moved on. I never stopped loving you. His voice cracked with the intensity of that confession. I know I didn't show it well at the end, but I never wanted our marriage to end. I was just lost in my own pride and guilt. Leora blinked, clearly moved by his words, but also skeptical. I wasn't sure. We didn't exactly talk after signing those papers. And then, well, time passed, my belly grew, and I kept telling myself it was better not to involve you. I was afraid you might try to claim custody or something drastic. She looked away, bouncing Isaiah, who was fussing again, perhaps picking up on the tension in voices. I was scared, Xavier, scared you'd break my heart again, or that maybe you'd reject the baby if you felt I'd trapped you, or... She trailed off. Xavier closed his eyes briefly, feeling tears slip down his face. He was overwhelmed by how much pain she must have gone through, and that he was the cause of both her fears and her having to face motherhood alone. He reached out slowly and brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb, a gesture so familiar yet long missed that they both felt a jolt. Leora, he said gently, I'm the one who is scared. Scared that I've lost you forever, and by extension, lost the chance to be a father to our child. But I'm here now, and I'm not going to run away from this. I want to be in Isaiah's life, and if you'll allow it, I want to be in yours again. She looked at him with wide eyes, full of conflict. Xavier, we can't just pretend the past didn't happen. There's a lot of hurt to work through. I know, he nodded. I'm not asking you to forgive me overnight, or to jump back into anything you're not comfortable with. But I'm asking for a chance to show you I've learned from my mistakes, that I can be the man you and Isaiah need. Isaiah, hearing his name, gurgled and smacked the table with his tiny hand, obliviously lightening the mood. Both of them glanced at the baby and chuckled softly through their tears. Leora sighed, looking down at her tea. After I had him, those first days in the hospital, I thought about you so much. She spoke quietly, words tumbling out like a confession. I kept wishing things had been different, that you were there holding my hand, waiting for him to be born, cutting the cord. I imagined you outside the delivery room, passing out cigars or whatever proud dads do. She managed a small laugh at herself. But then I reminded myself of how things really were and why I left. I told myself I had to be strong and do it on my own. My mom was there with me, thank God. But every time I looked at Isaiah's little face, I saw you. It's like I couldn't escape you even if I tried. Xavier's hand found hers again across the table. I'm sorry you had to go through that. You shouldn't have had to try to escape me. I should have been someone you could rely on, not someone you had to run from. I know I can't change the past, Leora. But I'm here now, and I'm begging you to let me be involved. Leora studied their hands together. It felt good to hold his hand, she had to admit to herself. Familiar and safe, feelings she hadn't truly felt in a long time. What exactly are you asking for, Xavier? She finally said. Because Isaiah isn't just some weekend responsibility. He's a baby who will need constant love and care. And I'm not the same person I was when we were together. I've grown tougher in some ways, maybe more cautious. I understand, Xavier replied softly. I'm asking first and foremost to be Isaiah's father, whatever that means day to day. If you need help with midnight feedings, doctor, appointments, diapers, or just someone to watch him when you need a break, I want to do it. I want to earn my place in his life and in yours if possible. I know I can't waltz back in and act like nothing happened. I know I hurt you deeply, but I also know that I love you, and I already love him more than I can put into words. I don't want to miss another moment. Leora's eyes softened as she gazed at Xavier, holding her hand with such earnest sincerity. This was the man she fell in love with, the one who cared, who was compassionate, not the cold workaholic he'd sometimes become under stress. She could see the change in him, or at least the determination to change. Still, she had her own pride and fear. What if we try and it doesn't work out, Xavier? I can't have my son get attached to you and then lose you. It would break him. And me. Xavier moved his chair around the table, so he was next to Leora, facing her directly. He gently placed a hand on Isaiah's back as the baby wiggled, and with the other hand held Leora's. "Look at me," he said softly. She met his eyes, tears swimming in them. "I can't promise I won't make mistakes, but I promise this, I will never abandon my son. And I will never abandon you again, not by choice or neglect. If you let me in, I'm in for life. That's it." Leora searched his gaze for any sign of doubt or falsehood, but she found none. She closed her eyes briefly, sending a silent prayer upward for guidance. When she opened them, she gave a small nod. "Okay," she whispered. "We'll figure something out. We can start slow." Xavier felt a wave of relief and gratitude. He had been given a tentative, "Yes, slow is fine. Whatever pace you need." Emotion overcame him, and before he could stop himself, he leaned in and pressed a gentle kiss to Leora's forehead, a gesture of gratitude and affection. "Thank you. You won't regret it, I swear." Leora didn't pull away. In fact, he felt her lean into the kiss slightly before they separated. They both blushed faintly, the intimacy of that simple touch electrifying after so long. Isaiah babbled happily, oblivious to the significance of the moment. But perhaps on some level, the baby sensed the tension easing between his parents, because he gave a little laugh as Xavier tickled his back lightly. They spent the next hour talking more practically. Leora shared how she had moved into a small apartment not too far from this very hospital, how she was working part-time from home for the non-profit, doing grant writing so she could care for Isaiah, and how her mother helped, occasionally but lived in another state, so visits were infrequent. She had a couple of close friends who pitched in with babysitting now and then, but otherwise she managed mostly alone. Xavier listened with guilt and admiration. Guilt that she had to struggle, admiration for how strong she'd been to do it all. He offered immediate support. "I can hire a nanny or arrange childcare so you can work more comfortably. Or if you want to stay home with him fully, I could help with expenses so you don't have to worry." Leora stiffened a bit at this. "Xavier, I'm not looking for your money. I never was." He realized his misstep and quickly clarified, "I know. I'm sorry. I just mean, you shouldn't have to worry about money at all while raising him. I want to contribute, not to control. Anything. Just to take some burden off you. We can set up a formal child support arrangement if you prefer through lawyers. But I truly just want to make sure you and Isaiah have everything you need." Leora relaxed slightly. "Okay, we can discuss the details later. It's true that raising a baby alone on a non-profit salary hasn't been easy." "I appreciate the gesture." They also talked about how to introduce Xavier to Isaiah in a consistent way. Since Isaiah was still so young, he could adapt quickly. "He already seems to like you," Leora said, watching as the baby gripped Xavier's thumb tightly, fighting sleep. It was past his bedtime now, and his little eyes were drooping. Xavier smiled warmly. "I'm glad. I like him a lot too," he joked softly. "I was thinking, maybe I could start by visiting you guys, or we could go on walks in the park together. I just want to spend time with him, both of you really, and learn everything about him. What he eats, his favorite toys, what helps when he's fussy, all of it." Leora nodded. "We could try that, maybe tomorrow. If you're free, you could come by our place. It's small, but you can see his nursery." Xavier's face lit up. "I'd love that. Tomorrow works, absolutely. My schedule is wide open for you." He then remembered his recovering father. "Actually, in the morning I should check on my dad here, but I can come by in the afternoon. Is that okay?" "Of course," Leora agreed. "Family comes first. Please send your father my well wishes." Xavier noted internally how natural it felt to have Leora care about his father's well-being. Despite everything, She had a good heart and held no grudges towards others. It struck him that she still even thought of his father as family in a sense. They exchanged phone numbers again. Xavier realized he still remembered her. Old number by heart, but she mentioned she'd changed it after moving. Typing her new number into his phone gave him a stupid surge of joy, like a teenager getting a crush's number all over again. It was fully dark outside now, and the hospital was quieter. Leora noted that Isaiah really needed to get home to sleep, and Xavier offered to drive them home, not wanting them to take a cab or bus at night. She hesitated, then accepted, realizing it would indeed be easier with him along to help. Xavier fetched his car from the parking lot, a sleek black luxury sedan that he'd once been so proud of, though now it seemed insignificant compared to everything else happening. He carefully adjusted the back seat to accommodate Isaiah's infant car seat. Leora laughed lightly as he struggled with it until she helped him find the right latch. "It's tricky if you haven't done it before," she assured as he flushed slightly at his incompetence. Once they were all strapped in, Xavier drove them to Leora's apartment, which was about a 15-minute drive. As he navigated the city streets, he listened to Leora hum softly to Isaiah, who finally fell asleep in the car. In the rearview mirror, Xavier glimpsed the baby's peaceful face and felt a swell of love. He also glanced at Leora sitting beside him, her face illuminated softly by passing streetlights. She looked tired but content in that moment, and he had to fight the urge to reach over and hold her hand while driving. Outside Leora's apartment building, he helped carry her bags and then insisted on carrying Isaiah upstairs while she led the way. She lived on the 3rd floor of a modest walk-up. The place was cozy and clean, though clearly baby items dominated the space, from a stroller near the door to toys in a basket in the living area and a high chair in the kitchen nook. It dawned on Xavier that he had missed all these domestic scenes, the adorable chaos of having a child at home. Leora guided him to the small nursery she had set up in what used to be a den, painted in soft yellow with a white crib and some cute animal decals on the walls. It was humble but filled with love. Xavier carefully laid a now fully asleep Isaiah in his crib, doing his best not to wake him. He stood there for a moment, looking down at his son's sleeping face for the first time, marveling at the tiny rise and fall of his chest with each breath. Emotion clogged his throat. He felt an almost overwhelming desire to protect this little boy forever. Leora stood beside him, whispering, "Good night, sweet boy," as she tucked a soft blanket around Isaiah. On impulse, Xavier leaned down and placed a feather-light kiss on the baby's forehead. "Good night, son," he whispered, the word son feeling both foreign and natural on his tongue. They tiptoed out of the room, leaving the door slightly ajar. In the hallway, they stood close, both a little reluctant to part now that the moment had come. "Thank you for the ride," Leora said softly. "And for everything tonight." Xavier shook his head. "I should be thanking you. You have no idea how much this means to me, being allowed back into your world, even a little." Leora looked up at him. They were standing quite close now, almost unconsciously. Xavier could see the subtle freckles on her cheeks, the way her eyelashes curled, the curve of her lips. It took all his restraint not to lean in and kiss her. He reminded himself, slow. But to his surprise, Leora spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "It feels nice, not being alone in this anymore." Her eyes shimmered with vulnerability. "I've been alone for so long, convincing myself I didn't need anyone's help. Having you here tonight, helping with Isaiah, putting him to bed, it felt nice. And that scares me a little." "Why?" Xavier asked, his hand gently brushing her arm in comfort. She took a shaky breath. "Because if I get used to having you around, and then you're gone, it'll break my heart all over again." Xavier couldn't hold back any longer. He cupped her face in his palms gently. "Leora, look at me." She did, eyes large and wet. "I'm not going anywhere. I swear to you, I will do whatever it takes to prove that. I know words might not be enough after what happened, but I'll show you through actions, every day if I have to." She closed her eyes, a tear slipping out. He wiped it with his thumb. For a moment, they just stood like that, his forehead leaning lightly against hers, breathing the same air. The tension was palpable, the old deep love still there between them, as undeniable as ever. Leora opened her eyes slowly, and in them Xavier saw the same love reflected back, mixed with fear and hope. It was Xavier who closed the gap, gently, giving her every chance to pull away. He tilted his head and pressed his lips to hers in a tender, lingering kiss. It was as if the world stood still. The kiss was soft, filled with all the unspoken apologies, the longing, and the enduring affection they had for each other. Leora responded after a heartbeat, kissing him back with a fragile sweetness. It wasn't a passionate, wild kiss, but rather the kind that whispered, "I've missed you, and you still have my heart." When they slowly parted, both had tears on their cheeks. Leora let out a trembling sigh. "I'm still in love with you, Xavier," she confessed in a broken whisper. "That never really went away, no matter how hard I tried to bury it." Hearing those words, Xavier felt an immense gratitude. "I never stopped loving you either," he said, voice thick, "not for 1 second. I thought about you every day." They embraced then, holding each other tightly in the dim light of the hallway. Xavier felt the dampness of her tears against his shirt and realized he was crying too. It was a cathartic, healing embrace, one that started to mend the wounds of the past. Eventually they pulled back, and Xavier knew he should leave so she could rest. They agreed he'd come by after lunch the next day. "I'll bring something, maybe food, so we can have a late lunch together. Is there anything you're craving?" he asked with a playful smile. Leora laughed quietly, a sound that made his heart leap. "You don't have to keep feeding me, Xavier. But sure, lunch sounds nice. Surprise me." He grinned. "Okay, but I promise, it'll be a good surprise, not a bad one." After one last gentle kiss goodnight, this time initiated by Leora with a shy sweetness, Xavier left. He drove home that night feeling like he was in a beautiful dream. The loneliness that had filled his penthouse apartment for the last year seemed to vanish as he stepped inside. For the first time since their separation, he felt hope and happiness blooming in his chest. He could still smell a hint of Leora's perfume on his collar, and when he closed his eyes, he could feel the weight of his son in his arms. He fell asleep on his couch thinking of a future that just a day ago he wouldn't have believed possible. A future where he had his family back, where he could be the husband and father he should have been all along. Over the next several weeks, Xavier and Leora carefully navigated their renewed relationship. True to his word, Xavier made every effort to show through actions that he was committed. He drastically adjusted his work schedule, delegating many tasks to his team. He even arranged to work from home or from Leora's apartment a few afternoons a week, just to be near. If a meeting wasn't absolutely urgent, he skipped it in favor of spending time with Leora and Isaiah. At first, Leora was a bit wary of these changes. She'd tease him lightly, "Won't your employees wonder why the big boss is me so often?" Xavier just smiled, holding Isaiah in one arm while attempting, awkwardly, but determinedly, to change the baby's diaper with the other hand. Let them wonder. Or better yet, "I've told them I'm on partial paternity leave for a while." He struggled a moment with the diaper tabs and gave her a sheepish look. A little help?" Leora laughed and came over to show him how to fasten the diaper properly. "Paternity leave, huh? Who would have thought?" Xavier looked up at her as he snapped the onesie back. "I should have done this the first time around," he said regretfully. "I'm not missing it now. I might not be doing it perfectly," he gestured at the somewhat crooked diaper job. "But I'm doing it." Leora smiled warmly. "That's what matters, Xavier." They fell into a comfortable pattern. Some days, Xavier would come over with groceries and cook for them, with mixed success. His kitchen skills were still a work in progress, but with Leora's guidance he learned fast. Other days, he'd pick them up and take them to a nearby park. There, Leora and Xavier would spread a blanket on the grass under a shady tree, while Isaiah sat up and played with his soft blocks or practiced crawling. They talked for hours on those park dates, about everything, reminiscing about the past, good times, gingerly addressing the painful memories, and dreaming about the future. Each conversation, each shared laughter or tear, wove them closer together. One late afternoon at the park, Leora confided some of her innermost feelings. Watching the golden sunlight filter through the trees, she said quietly, "I was so afraid of being a bad mother. After we lost the first baby, I thought maybe it was my fault somehow. And when I found out I was pregnant with Isaiah, I was overjoyed but also anxious every single day of the pregnancy, thinking something might go wrong. I was scared I'd lose him too. And I think I was also scared I'd lose my mind if I did." Xavier, lying on his side on the blanket facing her, while Isaiah gummed a teething toy between them, reached out and held her hand. "You're an amazing mother, Leora, and what happened before was not your fault. It took me a long time, and therapy, to accept it wasn't mine either. Sometimes, bad things just happen, and it's nobody's fault." Leora looked at him, surprised. "You went to therapy?" He nodded. "I did. After you left, I sort of fell apart quietly. I kept up a facade at work, but I was not okay. I eventually sought counseling to deal with the grief and guilt. It helped somewhat. One thing the therapist kept telling me was exactly that. Some things are out of our control, and we can't spend our lives blaming ourselves for them. It's part of what gave me the courage to keep going, and maybe what made me ready to face you if I ever got a chance again. I knew I had to own up to my mistakes, but also forgive myself for the things that weren't truly my fault." Leora squeezed his hand, a gentle smile on her lips. "I'm proud of you. That takes strength. I should have probably done the same, but I just poured everything into being a mom. You have a pretty great little boy to show for it," Xavier said, smiling at Isaiah, who was now trying to pull himself up using Xavier's arm. "And you had faith even when things were tough." He paused. "Your name actually means faith, doesn't it? I remember you telling me once." She laughed softly. "Yes, it does. I guess I had to live up to it. Faith that I could get through the darkest times." Xavier sat up, helping Isaiah stand, wobbly on the grass, holding his little hands for balance. "And did you have faith that we'd find our way back to each other?" Leora looked at him thoughtfully, running a hand through her curls which she'd let down today. "I hoped sometimes. Late at night when I felt lonely, I'd imagine you walking through the door, saying you wanted to start over. But then I'd convince myself it was just a fantasy. Eventually, I tried to kill that hope to protect myself. I told myself it was over and I should focus on Isaiah. Honestly, I didn't think I'd see you again, not in any meaningful way." Xavier's eyes glimmered with emotion. "I think someone up there decided to throw us a lifeline, arranging that meeting in the hospital. If my dad hadn't had that heart attack, if your appointment was at a different time, we might have missed each other entirely." Leora shivered at the thought. It was true. So many coincidences had aligned for that reunion. "Maybe it was meant to be," she said softly. "Like we needed to go through the fire, and then were given another chance when we were ready." Xavier gently let go of one of Isaiah's hands to wrap his arm around Leora's shoulders, pulling her close as they watched their baby take a couple of unsteady steps, holding onto Xavier's other hand. Isaiah giggled, and they both gasped and cheered softly when he managed a step on his own before plopping onto his bottom on the blanket. He was almost 7 months now, an early stander and eager to walk. They laughed and showered him with encouragement. The scene was idyllic, yet both parents felt the ghost of what could have been if they'd remained apart. It made them treasure the moment even more. As the sun set that day, Xavier helped Leora pack up the baby gear. Instead of going to separate homes, by now they were comfortable with each other enough that they often spent evenings together. Sometimes Xavier would simply stay at Leora's until Isaiah was asleep, then quietly go back to his place. Other times, like that night, Leora agreed to bring Isaiah and spend the night at Xavier's penthouse, an easier proposition now that he had swiftly moved to make his home baby-friendly, installing a crib in the guest room, securing furniture, stocking baby supplies. That night, after successfully moving a sleeping Isaiah from car seat to the crib without waking him, a team effort, they high-fived over. Leora and Xavier found themselves alone in the quiet living room of the penthouse. The city's skyline glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Leora stood admiring the view. I forgot how incredible this view is, she mused. She'd lived there once, but it felt like a lifetime ago. Xavier moved behind her, wrapping his arms loosely around her waist, testing the waters. She leaned back against him, accepting the embrace. I'd trade it in a heartbeat to keep what we have right now, he murmured against her ear. A view's a view, but you and Isaiah, you're everything. Leora turned in his arms to face him, looking up at him with affection and a touch of playful challenge. Everything, You who once upon a time was afraid a baby would be an inconvenience, now can't live without one drooling on your tie. Xavier winced dramatically. Ouch. I deserve that jab. She giggled. I'm just teasing. You've shown me a whole new side of you, Xavier. I like this dad version. He smiled softly. I like him too. I feel whole, in a way I never did before. I only wish I hadn't needed to lose so much to realize what was missing. Leora reached up and stroked his cheek. We can't change the past, but we can build the future, together, if that's what we choose. Xavier felt his heart flip. It is what I choose. What do you choose, Leora? Instead of answering with words, she lifted herself on tiptoes and kissed him. This kiss was deeper than the gentle ones they'd shared in the past days. It carried longing and passion that had been held back for a long time. Xavier responded in kind, kissing her lovingly, his arms tightening around her. They moved to the couch, their lips rarely parting except to whisper each other's names or words of love. It was as if all the pent-up desire and love of the past years came flooding back. Xavier was reverent, caressing her as if she might vanish, while Leora clung to him as if drowning and he was her life raft. Their kisses grew more heated, yet they were conscious to keep quiet with the baby sleeping in the other room. Leora's fingers tangled in Xavier's hair as he trailed soft kisses down her neck. Is this okay? He murmured, ever respectful, giving her a chance to pause. Her answer was to capture his lips with hers again, guiding his hand to her heart so he could feel its rapid beat. I've missed you so much, she breathed. Clothes were shed gradually, touches growing bolder, but always loving. When they finally moved to the bedroom, they were both trembling with emotion. Xavier made sure to show her with every touch how precious she was to him, how he would never take her for granted again. It was a slow, intimate union, a rekindling of their love expressed in the gentlest of ways. They moved together with familiarity and new fervor, tears mingling with their kisses, at times because it was not just bodies joining, but hearts finding home again. Afterwards, they lay in each other's arms under the covers, the city lights casting a soft glow in the room. Leora had her head on Xavier's chest, and he stroked her back softly. He felt a profound peace. I don't want to ever let you go, he whispered into her hair. She lifted her head to look at him. Then don't, she whispered back, smiling. He kissed her forehead, and then asked hesitantly, Do you think you and Isaiah would consider moving back in here? It's closer to my work, and plenty of space. We could turn that second guest room into anything you want, an office for you, a playroom for him. Or if you wanted a new place altogether, we could do that too. He took a breath. I just want us under one roof again. When you're ready, Leora's eyes searched his. Xavier Gray, are you asking me to move in with you or to marry you? She teased lightly, but he could hear the question behind it. He looked at her earnestly. Both, eventually. Move in as a step toward maybe doing it right again. I would marry you again in a heartbeat, Leora, but I'm not rushing you. I just want to wake up with you and our son every day. That's what I consider a perfect life. She reached up and caressed his face. I want that too. You have no idea how long I dreamed of hearing you say something like that. Let's do it. Slowly, but yes. We'll come here. It'll be an adjustment, but home is wherever we're together, right? He smiled, joy flooding him. Right. He then added with a chuckle. But we might need to baby-proof a lot more. This place was more bachelor chic when we first got it, sharp edges everywhere. She laughed. Don't worry, I'll handle the baby-proofing. You handle the heavy lifting. It was decided. Over the next couple of weeks, they made the transition. Xavier helped Leora pack up her apartment, and they moved her things into the penthouse. He insisted she not lift a finger too heavy. He hired movers and made sure it went smoothly. Leora's lease was ending soon anyway, and she gave notice she wouldn't renew. The day she and Isaiah officially moved in, Xavier brought home a large bouquet of lilies, her favorite, and a teddy bear for Isaiah. They spent that evening dancing in the living room, an echo of times past, only this time they had a giggling baby in their arms as they swayed to a soft jazz tune. It was bliss. Xavier's father, now recovered, came to visit not long after. Reginald Gray had been eager to see his grandson, and was even more thrilled to see his son happy again with the woman he'd always quietly thought of as a daughter-in-law. The elder Mr. Gray apologized sincerely to Leora for any coldness or reservations he'd had in the past, and he doted on Isaiah endlessly during the visit. It was a healing moment for the whole family. One night, after they had put Isaiah to sleep, Xavier pulled out a small velvet box from his pocket. Leora's eyes widened. Xavier. He opened it to reveal a ring. Not the same one as before, he had gotten a new one, a beautiful band with a solitaire diamond and tiny ones flanking it. He knelt down on one knee in their living room, taking her hand. Leora, I know we kind of did this backwards. We married, we divorced, and now we found our way back. But I want to ask you anew with a fresh start. Will you marry me again? Will you stay by my side as my partner, my love, the mother of our children? For all our days, I promise to cherish you and never let pride or fear come between us again. Tears welled up in Leora's eyes, a radiant smile breaking across her face. Yes, Xavier, of course yes. She laughed through tears. We might not even need a legal ceremony, since technically that paper is still fresh. Shh, he laughed, slipping the ring on her finger. I want to shout it from the rooftops this time. We'll do a renewal ceremony or whatever you want, or even just sign papers again, whatever makes you happy. I just want to call you my wife again properly. Leora pulled him up and into a kiss. You never stopped calling me that in your heart, did you? He embraced her tightly. Never. You've always been my wife, the love of my life. They decided on a simple vow renewal ceremony a few weeks later, attended by close friends and family. It wasn't about the fanfare, but about reaffirming their commitment. Leora wore a lovely cream-colored dress with lace sleeves, and Xavier donned a suit with a playful baby spit-up-resistant lining, as he joked. Isaiah, as the unofficial ring-bearer in a tiny suit, stole the show by babbling through the vows and making everyone laugh. Under a rose-draped arch in a small botanical garden, they exchanged vows once more. This time, those vows carried even more weight, because they understood what it meant to have and to lose, to break and to heal. When Xavier said I do, tears ran down his cheeks. When Leora echoed I do, her voice was clear and certain. You may kiss your bride, the officiant said with a grin. Xavier didn't need any encouragement. He kissed Leora passionately to the cheering of the few gathered loved ones and the delighted squeal of Isaiah in his grandpa's arms. It was a day of joy, of second chances fully realized. In the months that followed, life settled into a new, happy rhythm for the Grays. Xavier continued to balance work and home life much better than before. He made it a point to have breakfast with Leora and Isaiah every morning, feeding his son pureed fruits, or little finger foods, and inevitably ending up with more on his shirt than in the baby's mouth. He would laugh it off, joking that he'd wear the stains proudly as a dad badge of honor. Leora resumed more work with her non-profit as Isaiah grew into toddlerhood. But she made sure not to overextend, and Xavier was her biggest supporter, often rearranging his schedule so he could watch Isaiah. When she had meetings or needed to travel for a weekend conference, far from feeling neglected as before, Leora now felt like she had an equal partner who valued her time and goals. They communicated openly about everything. When Xavier felt work pressures creeping back, he talked to Leora, and sometimes even to his therapist, instead of bottling it up. When Leora felt overwhelmed with balancing motherhood and personal aspirations, she confided in Xavier, and he would brainstorm solutions or simply reassure her that she was doing an amazing job. One evening, after a particularly hectic day chasing an increasingly mobile Isaiah around the house, they collapsed on the couch together, exhausted but content. Isaiah had finally fallen asleep after insisting on hearing Goodnight Moon 3 times. Xavier had done the dramatic voices for the story, making the toddler laugh hysterically, which in turn made Leora laugh until tears. Now, in the quiet, Leora rested her head on Xavier's shoulder. "We make a pretty good team," she murmured, eyes closed. "The best team," he agreed, kissing her forehead. She looked up at him with a mischievous glint. "Could our team possibly handle an additional player, you think?" Xavier raised an eyebrow, not catching her drift for a second. Then, as her meaning sank in, his eyes widened. Do you mean?" Leora bit her lip, smiling. "I might be pregnant. I haven't taken a test yet, but I've been feeling some familiar things, and I'm a few days late." Xavier's heart skipped into a joyous hammering. "Leora, that's incredible. Should we get a test to be sure? Right now? I'll run to the pharmacy." He was already half up, excitement coursing through him. Leora laughed and tugged him back down. "Tomorrow morning is soon enough, eager beaver. Besides, if I am, it's very early. We have time." He settled, still buzzing. He caressed her cheek. "Are you happy? I mean, we didn't exactly plan it, but—" She took his hand and placed it over her belly gently. "I am happy, a little nervous, but happy. And this time, I know I'm not alone. I know the timing isn't as scary because I have you by my side fully." Xavier felt tears of happiness gathering. He remembered how he had reacted the first time and marveled at how different he felt now. "You have me, always," he said firmly. "And our kids will have us both, always." The next day they confirmed the pregnancy. A clear positive on the test, and later, a doctor's visit gave them the due date. They decided to keep the news private until the first trimester passed. But in the evenings, when Isaiah was asleep, they'd sit on the bed and excitedly chatter about baby names and whether Isaiah would have a little brother or sister. Xavier secretly hoped for a girl this time, one with her mother's eyes and grace, while Leora secretly hoped for another boy as lively and sweet as his father, but openly they both just wished for a healthy baby. Months later, they welcomed a baby girl into the world. Xavier was there every step of the way, holding Leora's hand through labor, which she nearly crushed during one contraction, but he didn't complain. Cutting the cord, and yes, passing out celebratory cigars, and chocolate cigars for those who didn't smoke, to the waiting family. They named her Amara, one of the names Leora had mentioned years ago, meaning eternal, and Grace, symbolizing the enduring grace that brought their family back together. Baby Amara had a head full of curly hair and, as Xavier liked to boast, her mother's beautiful eyes. Watching Isaiah gently hold his little sister with a lot of supervision and support was enough to make both Leora and Xavier cry tears of joy. They felt complete. In those quiet moments late at night, when Leora was nursing Amara and Xavier was tucking Isaiah into bed after he'd run in to check on Mummy and Sissy for the 10th time, they would catch each other's gaze and share a knowing smile. They had walked through fire and come out the other side stronger and together. Their story became a favorite to tell on their channel, a cautionary tale of how pride and poor priorities can break even the strongest bonds, but also an uplifting example of how love, if true, can find its way back. They made sure to emphasize the morals clearly. Communication is key. Never take your loved ones for granted, and never be too proud to apologize or change. Xavier would often add how becoming a father changed his perspective on what success truly meant, and Leora would speak about the strength of forgiveness and the importance of having faith in those you love. As they rocked on their porch swing one evening, watching Isaiah chase fireflies in the yard while baby Amara slept in Leora's arms, Xavier squeezed Leora's hand and murmured, "Thank you for giving me the best life lessons I ever learned, and for giving me a second chance." Leora leaned her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for proving you deserved it," she replied softly, "and for giving me back the love I thought I'd lost." They had turned their painful past into a beautiful present. The CEO and his once estranged wife found that real success lies not in boardrooms or bank accounts, but in the hearts of those we love and the family we build together. Sometimes the people we lose aren't gone forever. They're waiting for us to grow into the version of ourselves who deserves them. If this story touched you, hit like, share it with someone who still believes in second chances, and tap subscribe for more stories that remind you. Real love never disappears, it only waits to be found again.